Welcome to the Master Your Millions podcast, the show all about your financial potential and leaving a legacy for future generations. Here are your hosts, Jason and Scott Henderson.
I am your host, Scott Henderson, and my co-host is Dr. J. We've got a wonderful speaker today that we're very excited to interview. Jason, who do we have coming on?
Well, Scott, I met Janet just recently, and I was quite intrigued by what she does. Let me tell you a little bit about her background. She's a California girl. However, now she lives in the Midwest. Grew up in California. She got I believe it was an art degree, and then she got a law degree from the University of West Los Angeles School of Law, and she's been a paralegal and been in the law field for a long time. So she knows a lot about wills and trusts. However, what she does is she helps people clear the path to get to their dreams. And so, as part of our mission on this podcast of talking about amassing wealth and enjoying wealth, I thought that would be an interesting conversation for us to have today. So, welcome to the podcast, Janet.
Thank you.
So, tell me a little bit, how is it that someone goes from being a paralegal and having a 40-year experience and in the law field, especially around wills and trust, where you now are an emotional healer? You help people to overcome past traumas so that they can break through to better themselves. I don't know what you would really say there.
I call it the best. Well, for me, it's the best Janet God made.
Okay. How did you get into that?
From healing myself.
Tell us more.
I ended up with a terrible, debilitating eating disorder, love addiction, all kinds of issues and addictions. And starting at the age of 19, I just set on a path of recovery. And it led me to some energy healing work. Some of my therapists and a chiropractor turned me onto it. And I started noticing amazing progress. And I just memorized everything. It's like a video playing in my head. And I was fascinated by it. And I would grab people off the street, my friends, my family, and say, hey, want to do a healing session? Sure, it's free. Okay. And I would do healing sessions and help people through addiction, relationship problems, blocks to their dreams. And I started seeing miraculous results in the people I worked with. So I continued doing it and continued studying and continued working with people. And then I wrote a book about it because I was so amazed with the results, called Sandcastles, Tools for Letting Go of Addiction and the Pain of the Past. And then I wrote a book for parents so that people don't have to reinvent the wheel and they get raised correctly in the first place. So they're happy, joyous, and free. And that book is called How to Raise a Healthy, Happy Child.
And that's available on Amazon, I take it?
Correct. So is
right.
Both of them, yes.
Right. And so everyone that's listening, we will put a link in the show notes to both of those. So you can just click on the show notes right after you leave us a review and a 5-star, and, like us and subscribe. But then you can go over and get Janet's books, whichever ones applies to you. And we think that'd be a great idea. Just give us real quick, maybe one or two success stories. Tell us kind of a before in a person, what they were struggling with, and an after.
Sure. There's so many.
You can change, right? And you can go ahead and change the name, call them Bob and Tom or something like that. But just okay. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, one of them, hold on one second. One of them is very proud of his accomplishments and the work he's done with me. So we'll call him Chris because that's his name. And I was in the park writing my second book, and I had my manuscript for my first book, and it hadn't been published yet. And I was sitting there with my 2 dogs and my cat writing, and a fella came up to me in the park, and he said, we started playing with the dogs and talking, and it turned out he lived in the park. He drank 30 beers a night, smoked a lot of pot, and was always knocking over trash cans, getting arrested, going to jail, getting in fights, and suicidal, quite frankly. So I heard him speak, and then I said to him, "Oh, would you like to read my book? I have my manuscript here." He goes, "Sure." He sat down next to me and he started reading my manuscript. And then I said, "Do you want to do a healing session?" He said, "Sure." So we worked for 2 months while I was in town there. I was traveling at that time. And we worked for 2 months then. And then we continued to work over the phone for the next 2 years, 2.5 years. All of a sudden, about a couple months ago, I got a text message from him. He said, "I've got the keys to my new apartment, and I'm sober." And it makes me cry just because it was so amazing, the transformation. And he sent me pictures of his apartment, and he sent me pictures of his keys to his apartment. Then I got a text message from him, "I'm getting a car." So it was just an amazing transformation. I have one other client who was in rehab. I knew her from from a few years before. We were friends, and we spoke, and she said, "I'm in rehab with my son and my husband." And I was like, "For what?" "For drugs and alcohol." "Oh my goodness." She says, "Yeah, I'm tired of going to meetings." And out of my mouth came, "I can heal you of that." I mean, whether I heal them or they just get healed from the work we do, that's what came out of my mouth. And so for the next 4 months and 3 weeks, we did healing sessions about 3 times a week. And after 4 months and 3 weeks, she called me for our session, and she said, "Wait, I have to tell you something." I said, "What?" She says, "I no longer crave drugs or alcohol. I wake up in the morning happy to be alive and looking forward to the day." And shortly thereafter, she moved out of her rehab, and I worked with the husband, and they both moved out of rehab, moved back in together. They were separated and are happily married to this day, living their dreams.
That's really cool, and that's very happy. I'm happy for those people. One of the things we talk about on this podcast is the importance of team. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts as what it means that we are individuals and we do have our own path to walk on. However, we are somewhat dependent on others, team members, if you will. Maybe that's a therapist, maybe that's a friend. What's your thoughts in that area?
Wait, okay. Let me go back. I wanted to clarify one thing real quick about my last story. That person that I talked about, now, after the work we did, she has a thriving business, which she didn't have before. So
Excellent.
that's why so it also works in terms of a person's professional goals. Okay, now your question about teamwork. Same.
Right.
Okay, exactly what's the question again?
Well, you are working with individuals, right? And
Right.
have you seen people? You said you healed yourself, yet you said you had therapists. Is anybody really able to overcome some of their obstacles completely by themselves, or does it require a helper, a team, someone that is there with them?
In my opinion, it requires somebody there with them, supporting them, caring about them, so they don't feel alone. Because with this work, we get so deep into such painful wounds. And the reason we're in this situation in the first place is because we have felt all alone and terrified and unsupported, either our whole life or else as a child. At some point, we felt all alone and terrified, and that is the trauma, is not feeling cared about, not feeling advocated for, having to do everything for ourselves, and just surviving. And so what I say is, it takes you right back to those feelings, which are so traumatizing and terrifying, that unless you have somebody there with you, caring about you, supporting you, walking you through it, it's very difficult to do it by yourself. I have clients that tell me from 10 years ago, they say, "I still do the tapping." That's the emotional freedom technique. "Every morning I do the tapping in the shower. It helps me every day release my day's stresses." So yes, on one level, people do, it's like, instead of giving a person a fish, you teach them to fish. But in the beginning stages, when you're still, deer in the headlights, traumatized, and you can't get past these blocks, it's so good to work with somebody. You don't feel alone. You feel like you're on a team and you have support.
Well, why is it that the human tendency is to attempt to do it alone? Why do you believe that that's the case, that we feel alone? I mean, very rarely are we completely alone. We have interaction. We walk down the street, we see other people. What do you think it is about human nature that makes us to recoil, if you will, and go inside?
I think it's a protection, because in the past, when we reached out for help, or we reached out for love or nurturing or comfort or support, we were shunned. We were rejected. We were denied that nurturing, that love. And so as a protection now, we say, I'm not even going to reach out for that, because I probably will be disappointed. So rather than take the risk of feeling disappointed, which is the lowest vibration, so hard to feel that disappointment, that I just won't risk it. I'm safe. I'm good over here. I'm safe over here in my corner. And we stay safe and we stay isolated, but we don't take the chance of being disappointed. We know what it feels like to be all by ourselves. We know what it feels like to be isolated. That's comfortable. That's home. Even though there's that big part of us, that expanded part of us that wants more, it's still comfortable and home, and it's where we vibrate. It's where we've come to live, to protect ourselves.
So when you say that at one point we feel like that we've been rejected or denied something, that's a perceived thing or a real thing? Because to some degree, if we, let's say we talk to our parents and our parents see something, some event differently than we do, that they attempted to reach out, but our interpretation of that, right? Whether and I'm not trying to belittle anything. I'm just trying to say, sometimes we have this way of interpreting experiences, and they may or may not be healthy, right? And even at that, let's say that it was unhealthy, yet we started to feel like you're saying alone and things. How is it that we can break out of that cycle and be willing to reach out and say, hey, I need some help. I need a friend. I need someone to talk to. I have an issue. What are some mechanisms that we could, people could help to recognize that that's what they need to do?
Well, for one thing, seeing a podcast like yours, just hearing us talk about it's okay to reach out, that the reason we're stuck is because we're trying to protect ourselves, even though we're limiting ourselves. But if we know that it's safe to reach out, that's what we're doing. A watched mind cannot control you. If you tell your mind, hey, let's stop isolating. It's okay. We're not going to die if we get disappointed. We're really going to be okay. And you have the courage to reach out for help. That's the thing, is just educating yourself of what you're doing and why. And so you outsmart your psyche. You outsmart your trauma. And you say, I'm going to reach out for help. I'm going to be okay.
I was wondering if, I was just thinking as I ask you that question, most of what we see around us, whether it's the grass, the trees, the birds, all of creation, it's not completely isolated, right? The grass needs water, grass needs sunlight. It does need a place to, a place. It needs soil. It needs all these different things. Birds need things, and snakes, I don't care what it is, right? And so I'm wondering whether people would simply take a minute to recognize what's around them. Going back to your example of the man in Chris in the park, he was in the park and yet he could see around that there's all these different examples of things that are outside themselves or itself that it's dependent upon to help it to grow and to get to a better place, or if you will, right? Yeah, maybe a grass going from 3 inches to 4 inches is not a better place in some people's mind. Yeah, that is progress, right? That's growth. And it still needs something outside that. So being willing to accept that need or accept that, yeah, or admit that we need help. Now, we can take this in a financial sense too, right? We can say, wow, I got invested in this project or whatever, and I lost my money. Or I put my money here and it's gone, right? Yeah. And so are we to stop? Are we to recoil and go within ourselves? Are we to really kind of analyze and reach out to some other people that have some experience? So someone's had a trauma in their life, you're an expert in that area, and you can help them with that. And when they recognize that they need that, um, that's an important part of a team, is finding someone that maybe's been there, done that. You've been there, done that with, like you said, with your eating disorders and some other image issues that you have. You went through that, and so you can truly help people along the steps, right? As am I kind of speaking the right way you're talking about? So tell us a little bit about your EFT. What's the origins of that, and what's that all about?
Okay. Well, it was devised by a chiropractor. I'm not sure exactly when. Might have been the 80s, but I'm not sure. But I, at the same time, simultaneously was introduced to it by my brilliant energy worker therapist at the time, and also by my chiropractor independently. And I started doing the tapping, and I noticed huge advances in my spiritual growth, my self-esteem, my inner calmness, my choices, um, my relationships. I mean, yeah, I've always got challenges. We're always going to have challenges and ways to grow. But I just started doing it myself and then inviting other people to do it with me. And what it is that you say a certain phrase. Let's say you're terrified of an interview. You can't sleep, you can't eat. You have an interview in the morning. You're so scared. And so what you'll do is you'll say, even though I'm terrified of making a bad impression at my interview tomorrow, I deeply and completely love, accept, and forgive myself. And you tap on certain energy meridians and you say that, even though I'm terrified of making a bad impression at my interview tomorrow, I deeply and completely love, accept, and forgive myself. And you tap on the different energy meridians and you say that, and it clears the vibrations of that terror. And by the time you're done tapping, you do it 3 times. And I explain it all in my book, how you do it. By the time you're done tapping, you feel calm. I've never seen anything like it. It's better
I've
than
heard
any.
of a lot of
Sorry.
people that do it. I have heard people that even some high level athletes that'll do it before, important games and stuff, that they'll do this tapping, and to help them calm or help them to better focus or whatever that is. I don't
Yeah.
pretend to know the physics or anything behind it, but it's very interesting to me that something like that seems simple. You just went through that seems simple. You do this, you do this, you do this, and your book explains it, I'm sure, in much more detail. That can be a benefit to someone, to help them to say, I mean, some people are terrified to invest money, right? And for the fact that they're afraid that they're going to lose it all. Well, sometimes with nothing ventured, nothing gained, is what they
I,
say. I don't know if you've heard that before, Scott, or not, but that's sometimes you have to risk something. And sometimes they have to overcome that fear to simply make the first step. Buying pick a number, $100,000 house or a $500,000 house, a $5 million house, can be fearful on different levels. And having that technique could potentially help you overcome those fears, because you'll never know if you don't really go out there and put yourself out there. I don't know. Am I speaking crazy, Scott? What do you think?
No, I think you're spot on. I think a lot of times, at least what I've been understanding as we've been talking about this, is it's a change in perspective, right? In your example, whether you're investing 100,000, 500, or $5 million, even if you kept in a bank account, that's a risk. And so by just tweaking your understanding of what is actually going on and your perspective, a lot of times you can gain further clarity, and it can help you through this process. So you talked about this tapping. Is there some other things that people can do just to help along that? Is that kind of the main thing you have your clients do?
Yeah, well, so there's three things, but let me just real quickly address the fear of investing. There's two components to this. The first one is, like you say, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But the thing is, either we'll learn from it, because it's all about learning to grow. And the other thing is, let's say we invest and we lose all our money and we feel terrible. We feel like a failure. We made a big mistake. We've lost all that money. It's going to bring up feelings, painful feelings. But we have to remember that's all old stuff coming up so that we can clear it and heal it from the past. So it's a win-win. And then in response to your question, yes, there are three components to my Janet Stegman's solutions to healing the blocks. And that would be the journaling. So I encourage people to get a journal and just start writing about all the times you were hurt as a child or a young adult or in your marriage. Just write stream of consciousness, all the times you remember feeling ouch, feeling disappointed, hurt, abused, bullied. Your feelings were hurt. You know somebody didn't care about you. Your parents didn't care about you, or they criticized you, or they neglected you. All the times, just write and write and write. Get it all down on paper. Then we pick out the feelings and the most traumatizing things. And I do muscle testing, so I'll ask your body, where do you want to start? What wound? What traumatizing wound do you want to start clearing? And there's always an answer. And then after we do the tapping, I do an inner child visualization for 15, 20 minutes. And that resets the psyche to a point of where you would be now had that child been advocated for, been treated properly.
So let's go, like exactly what you're saying, Scott. A change, she's helping you change your perspective on whatever that was, right? Whatever that trauma or disappointment was, by changing your perspective on that. And if we change our perspective on, even if you lose the money, right, in an investment, like you said, when you're tapping, it's going to be okay, right? I forgive myself. You do the best you can. And truly, that's everyone does that. Maybe some do it better than others. Some of the most successful people that you read about or I know have had all kinds of failures, and they don't continue to dwell on those. They, like you Janet, it's a learning experience. Okay, I learned that, and now I know that is not the right way to go in that direction, or I know this, or I know that. And the faster that we can pick ourselves up and go on to the next one, the better off we're going to be. And that's what it's all about. I mean, we talk about on our podcast about accumulating and enjoying our wealth. Well, in order to accumulate that wealth, there's going to be times when you lose some wealth, and you're going to have struggles, and you're going to have failures, and it's okay to do so. Sometimes, when you're unable to deal with it very well, then you need something like this tapping technique that Janet's talking, the EFT, right? And like I said, I've heard about it from, I think I was a chiropractor, and I also heard from another friend who's a CEO of a fairly large company, that he uses it, and it helps simply change your perspective. That's been fascinating. I have enjoyed our interview, Jen. There's some parting thoughts you'd just kind of throw out to everyone to say, hey, when you're in this situation, think this, or contact me. And as we said, we'll put your contact information in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. Well, so what I say, somebody asked me earlier, how do we know if we need the tapping? And I said, because if you examine each aspect of your life, your personal life, your financial life, your professional life, your relationships, and if everything isn't exactly the way you want it, that's when we get to work. And it's up to everybody's choice. You can stay where you're at, nothing wrong with that. Or you can say, I want more, and I'm willing to leave no stone unturned to get to the point where my mindset is helping me create exactly the life that I want. And
Love that. I
contact
love
me
that you
if there's-
said this. Allow yourself to say that I want more. Allow yourself to say that I, like everything else in nature, want to grow. Nature is all about growth and expansion. I don't know of anything that's alive that isn't expanding and growing. If it's not expanding and growing, then it truly is dying. Whether it's a tree, whether it's, I pick whatever it is. What you said there, Janet, was awesome. Allow yourself to say, I want more. And the cool thing is, we live in a country where that's possible. There's been a lot of people have made sacrifices. And I don't care who you are in your life, you can look back in your ancestors and you look at people that, hey, they have put some things on the line and made it possible for us to have that, which is really wonderful. And I'm grateful for that. Scott, any parting words that you would have?
No, I think that was a great place to end that off. Too many people sit still and become stagnant. You need to do better. So, Janet, thank you so much for coming on. We've really appreciated this time.
You are very welcome.
Guys, thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with Janet, we'll put all of our links in the show notes down below. If you would like to connect with Jason or I, make sure to hit us up on any one of the social media platforms. And we will also put all the links down below. If you like the show, also give us a 5-star review. It really helps out. And last, remember that mastering your millions all starts with your mind and your team. Make sure they are the best. We will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Millions with Jason and Scott Henderson. Check the show notes for any links or contact information about today's guest. Make sure to follow the show so you don't miss any future episodes.